And let me know if my microphone's playing up. This is only my third live stream now. So if anything's going wrong, make sure you let me know, because these are things that we can work out as we go. So if you caught my previous live stream, where am I going to clip you? I don't know. I'm going to put this. I don't really have anywhere. Consequence of having no collar. Anyway, so if you caught my previous live stream, you know that this Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni stuff is kind of rubbing me the wrong way. But I couldn't get it out of my head, so I went and I watched the movie. And I'm not going to lie, I turned it off after 10 minutes. But it's not what you think. I tried again, and over the course of 2 days, I got through it a couple of times. And it's definitely something that no one's talking about. Everyone's too busy talking about the extra stuff going on. No one's talking about the reason why it's kind of, the movie itself is not quite what we thought it was. And as someone with experience personally in DV, in exactly the situations that are presented in the movie, it's something that I'm seeing from a perspective which hasn't been shared either. To be honest, I've only seen one other video anywhere, and it was about a month ago from the psychologist's perspective. And I've said before that I personally disagree with people who are psychologists by trade, who don't have the personal experience outside of their clients to know what it's like to go through trauma. And this particular video was exactly that. And within the first few seconds of the video, I could tell this person was also incorrect about what they were seeing. And that's because I've lived this. I've seen this. And as someone who has also spent a lot of time learning about this kind of concept in the meantime, it's not something that I'm naive to. I've had 15 years worth of recovering from my situation, trying to find the right way for myself to handle things. And because of that, I saw stuff that she didn't see, and it was very blanket statement, word salad, kind of what you would expect someone to say without diving any deeper into it than that. So I won't tell you who that was, because I don't think that's fair. I will say instead my opinions. And if you come across this other video, you can see her opinions from the psychologist's perspective on the DV elements in the movie. And maybe you'll pay attention to both sides of the situation, because I saw something no one has spoken about. And from looking further into Colleen Hoover, I think it was very, very deliberate this way. So if you haven't seen it, there will probably be spoilers, because I'm specific things that are happening in the movie and why to one particular category or another, and giving my personal opinions. This is all my opinions, but they're my opinions based on my experiences and things that I have learned along the way dealing with myself, and so that I can help other people as well. Oh, I've got a few people. Hi, JJ, and I can't pronounce that one. Quick question. That's an inappropriate question. I'm not going to bother with that one. Not my stick, not my dog. So let's get started. I've got my novelty mug. I'm probably going to keep using my novelty mug in all of these live streams, because why not? I love this mug. It's a very good mug. And I can get to the point. That's also not a very appropriate question, so I'm not going to bother with that one. We are ladies here. We are nice people here. Anyway, I might just hold this bit, because I don't really have anywhere to pin this very easily. So I do have a few notes. I had to watch it more than once, and I had to go through a couple of different scenes over again because the the movie itself is not like the book. There are certain things which are the same and certain things which are represented differently, because when you read a book and when you watch a movie, there are reasons why they're artistically done differently. And the book itself was written in 2015, 16. It was published in 16, and Justin Baldoni has actually been making the movie since 2019. So it's been a long movie. If you consider that it's been taking that long, we've only just had it released last year. So what's that, like 5 years? That's a long time to make a movie. And obviously, certain other things have happened around the world along that time frame. And it's just a very, very long, chaotic amount of time to be able to do that one movie. Because 2019 is apparently, according to Google, I say apparently when it's something I've heard or learnt from somewhere but not directly from the source. So, according to Google, apparently he got the rights and started filming, started putting the movie together in 2019. So that could mean that he started filming at that point, or it could mean that he started writing the script, or he started gathering people together for it. It doesn't go into more detail than that. Hello, Jessica. Hi. I hope you're here for a bit of a conversation and a bit of a back and forth with you guys as well about the movie. Um, I think you know which video I'm talking about by the look of that. I came across it once, and I personally felt that it was not an accurate depiction of the story, but I have, being someone who's lived through it myself, because I did go through pretty horrific DV myself. It was a situation that lasted a few years, and then it had a climax, which was also traumatic. So I have CPTSD from the living situation I was in, and I have PTSD from the specific event that finally got me out of it. And because of that, I have a different insight to exactly what the elements in this book and in the movie are, compared to someone who has clients and has spent a long time, any amount of time, being the service person as opposed to the victim, which is why I'm making this. I had opinions when I saw the movie itself that I couldn't get out of my head. And a huge part of this channel, if not the core point of this channel, is to have a space to offload and vent and share and grow and get back to who I am and kind of process things I've gone through from the perspective of someone who has experienced it for a long amount of time, who has gone through all of the different stages of recovery and grief, and is now at the point where what I want is to prevent someone else from going through the same thing. So if you haven't seen any of my previous videos or previous live streams, make sure you go back and check those too. Don't forget to give me a like if you're enjoying any of these, because that's how I know. That's how I know that you're enjoying what we're talking about. Do you like the color yellow? It's my favorite. Not so much. I'm more of a lavender lilac kind of person personally, and a little bit into pink. But anyway, so I did make notes to make sure that I don't forget to mention certain things. So if I'm looking down, it's just because I'm checking on my notes. I did have to watch the movie a few times, and I had to stop at the 10-minute mark because there were, you know, when you see a movie or a TV show, and it's usually in the pilot when they're trying to figure out a few concepts and something doesn't really feel right. Something didn't feel right. It was, in my opinion, if I had to put a finger on it, I would have to say that maybe Blake Lively wasn't the best choice for this. She's a very pretty woman, and she's someone who has clearly never really experienced enough to have the emotional depth for this role. So I found that her emotions were off throughout the entire movie, even the parts that were supposed to be very emotion driven. Something just was not right. And as an actress, I think she was maybe a poor pick, but I don't really know. Off the top of my head, I would probably say Anna Kendrick, because she is very, very good with her emotions. And she's very broad, but she also looks a bit too young to be paired up with Justin Baldoni. So I can't really say who I would have put in there instead. Just probably not her. Let's see if I can attach this again. What's my favorite drink? Coffee. Definitely coffee. I'm a coffee person. Let me know if my microphone's not okay, because I'm having an issue with it tonight. Wrong shirt. It doesn't like shirts like this. But we'll make it work. And I can't be certain how long we'll be on tonight. I guess however long it takes. But if one of my kids wakes up, I'll have to run off. So I'm here while I'm here, and if I have to, I'll come back. So I haven't read the book yet. I usually, because of my experiences, I don't actively go hunting for this kind of content usually. If it says, watch out, trigger warning, it's got these elements in it, I don't worry about it, because I've been there, done that, lived it. I don't need to worry about it again. But in this particular case, I was basically being bombarded by the concept with Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively in the extra stuff, and it made me wonder about the movie, because no one seems to be talking about the movie. Have you noticed that everyone wants to tell you about the back and forth between them, but they're not actually talking about how accurately the movie either follows the book or how accurately it addresses the core topic? And as someone who's experienced it herself, it is an important point to me that awareness is constantly being put out there, because it's not the person going through it who's going to necessarily notice some of these red flags, but someone close to them will. They might point things out as things as just happening naturally in the relationship, and then the person who's going through it has to see it in a different way. So, because you can't tell someone who's going through something, and this is going to be an unfortunate fact, but you can't tell someone who's going through DV, oh, just leave him, because that's not how it works. It's very much more complicated than that. Oh, thank you. I'm in the process of playing with my hair, so cut it a bit, color it a bit, find something new for the change of season. Nothing too crazy though. It's just something different. One thing that came out really early in the movie, and like I said, there may be spoilers here, so, and I did have that at the beginning of the when I put the live stream up anyway, that there might be spoilers for the movie. So if you've read the book, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about the book itself. But I'm still looking for the book. I'm looking for the book with the original cover rather than with her on it, because I want to be able to see it before all of this extra stuff is going on. According to Google, the overview for the book itself is It Ends With Us is a romantic novel by Colleen Hoover, published in 2016, based on the relationship between her mother and father. Hoover described it as the hardest book she's ever written. It explores themes of DV and emotional abuse. That's an important point to keep in mind when you compare that to the movie. According to Google, the overview for the movie is very early on. No, not there. Overview for the movie, where are you? It says, Lily Bloom, this is according to Google, not me. I'm just reading what Google said, basically. Lily Bloom moved to Boston to chase her lifelong dream of opening her own flower shop. A chance meeting with a charming neurosurgeon soon sparks an intense connection. Sounds like a love story. Doesn't sound like it's anything more interesting than that. So far doesn't sound like it's of anything to do with the book. Sounds like it could be something completely different. But as the two fall deeply in love, she begins to see a side that reminds her of her parents' relationship. Okay, so there we're starting to get into something. When Lily's first love suddenly re-enters her life, her relationship with her husband gets upended and leaving her with an impossible choice. To me, none of that implies DV. And maybe it's because they were trying to soften it a little bit for a movie audience, because you can say things in a book you can't really show in a movie, especially if you've got a few hundred people reading the book and you're wanting a few million people to watch the movie. So it is a little bit understandable, but that feels like gaslighting. You are deliberately pretending that certain elements aren't in it, implying that it's something that it's not. And that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with my opinion, but that's my opinion. That looks like gaslighting just when you compare what Google says is already put up. That's not necessarily what Google has decided, but that's what Google is representing as the information about the book compared to the information about the movie. So that would be the marketing team putting out this deliberate information. And there are things that during the press junkets and everything, when they were getting ready to release the movie, there are lots of things they were saying that had nothing to do with any of this. You could almost listen to half of the team talking about it one way and half of the team talking about it the other way and think you're talking about two different movies. Because in a lot of it, Justin Baldoni has been very public the entire way that it's going to be about DV and how emotionally driven this is because of the book. Always bringing it back to the book and the core subject matter, which is DV, and shedding a light on what that means, what it looks like to people who don't necessarily know what it looks like, which is a lot of people actually. And the second side, mostly Blake by herself, but her side of things, and each time she's brought in one of her friends to do something, or when she's brought in Ryan to do something, her husband, it's made it seem like more of a rom-com as opposed to a serious subject matter that is from a book. She does occasionally mention that there is a particular person named Colleen Hoover that she is kind of hoping to get more stuff from, but doesn't really talk about the book itself almost ever. And that's just what I have found. If you found her talking about the book itself, then I would love to know that, because I haven't seen it. And I haven't heard anyone reporting that she's talking too much about the book either, just that there are more books, meaning there could be more movies, which is really not the point that it should be, especially if the person who wanted to create the book and create the movie did it with a very specific core topic in mind. And it may not be a very nice topic, it may not be a very marketable topic, but it's marketable enough, and it is something that needs to get said at some point. We need to kind of get used to saying it, because it's not going away just because we abbreviate the name. That's pretty much something that people seem to be assuming is going to happen if you just abbreviate the name so that people don't get upset that you're saying it. That makes no sense to me. But she makes it sound like a rom-com, which she does do a fair few of those. I actually double-checked through a whole bunch of the things that she does, and it's mostly what she does. It's very one-sided characters and nothing really too deep. This is probably the deepest thing that I've seen her in, and I went looking for things that she might have been in that had a deeper character to them. And this is pretty much as close as she's come, and she didn't do very well at it. As an actress, if you're doing an emotional role, you need to be emotional in the right intervals. She had the emphasis on the wrong syllable. is what I would probably describe it as, because there were points that just didn't quite work, like her emotions were off point. I'm not going to say what it was, but there was a particular scene close to the end, not long before she leaves the main character, Ryle. It's Lily, Ryle, and Alice. They're the main people. And but she's meant to obviously be in a very physically traumatic event. I have personally experienced that event. That particular specific event happened to me on multiple occasions. And having my personal insight on living through that, but going all the way, not just like almost but not, because it doesn't actually get close enough to looking like that. I think it happens more thoroughly in the book than it does in the movie, because the movie, it does look, and I do have that in my notes, that in the movie it was represented a little bit differently, because there was an extra angle to Ryle's character that no one seems to want to talk about, and I will. I'm going to talk about my opinion of Ryle's perspective, because there is a very strong one no one's talking about. But in that particular situation, you would expect that she would be kind of simultaneously confused, because it's never happened before, and physically triggered enough that she's either going to fight or flight or freeze. She didn't really do too much fighting. She kind of lent into it, and her body language was a real giveaway. She lent into it. And I know she's an actress and she was trying to act in the scene, but it didn't work the way other actresses have. The exact same scene was done in Pretty Woman, and that one landed. This one didn't. And if you've seen it and you get to that scene, you'll know what I mean. But it happened in Pretty Woman, and Julia Roberts, she got it. She was emotionally and physically, all of her body language, all of her acting put her in a position where she looked like she was confused and hurt and scared, didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go. It was in her eyes, it was in everything. In this particular scene, I don't think that it landed the way it probably needed to, because she didn't, how am I going to say it? Because I'm trying not to really say what it was that happened. It's a pretty triggering thing to see it, but it's not really, it should have been more triggering, especially since I've actually lived through it. She didn't react as, no, please don't, as she probably needed to, because she's just not that great an actress. And I don't think there's anything wrong with me saying it, because a lot of people have said it. It's not just me. A lot of people have said she's not a great actress, and this might have just been a little bit too far for her. So getting back to the core point, I like that you agree with me there, because it's something that if you're going to portray in a movie like this and it's got a specific point behind it, you need to have actors and actresses that really drive home that point, so that when someone is watching it, whether they've personally had the experience of it or someone who's never had the experience of it, you want it to feel alive. You want that particular scene, you want that particular movie to engross you enough that you feel inside of it. You want to pretty much make your audience feel like they're in the movie with you, so that they can leave the movie feeling like they lived that experience enough to understand it. And when you've got a topic matter like this, especially if the whole point of the book was for awareness on the topic, and the whole point that Justin made the movie was for the awareness on the topic, you need to be able to portray the topic accurately. So we start the movie. This is kind of where the spoilers come in, because I might say something that sounds more like a spoiler, but I'm trying not to. So we start the movie pretty early on we're introduced to just a young girl. Like, she's not young, like she's the age that you see her in the movie. She's Blake, but she's coming home to what is obviously her family home, and she's greeted by her mother, and you find out that she's actually reluctantly going to her father's funeral. And so she should be one of two main emotions: either I don't want to be here, why am I here, but I'm here anyway, I didn't have a connection with him, or I'm so sad and I don't know how to handle it because she lost her dad. I know that I would not be able to handle it. I know that I would probably be numb and very, very hurt, and it would take me a while to get over it. But she didn't show any particular this way or that way about coming home. And in the first little bit, you find out that there's something extra going on. There's a reason why she's not happy to be there. And she can't even say a few fake words for her dad at his funeral, but no further explanation. That's a pretty good way to start the story out, because you entice people into thinking, okay, well, there's something going on there, but what is it? But she doesn't seem to give very much, and what she does is very jagged. That's something I noticed throughout the entire movie, is that it very much seemed like two people were arguing during the writing and the filming and the everything, because some bits just don't line up very well. It's like this day this director, that day that director, and the story itself is just not very cohesive the entire way through, almost like there's maybe something cut. And I don't know where I would put the cut scenes in, because they're just kind of everywhere. So it's hard to tell what's going on. And I will be getting the book, and I will read the book, and I don't know if I'll do one of these for the book, because I don't really think I need to. I didn't even go. That's understandable. See, she could have done that too. That would have been a nice explanation for it. Like, there was also no, where was she before the funeral? Where was she living? It went from she walked out of her father's funeral to, oh, I'm suddenly living in Boston. From a story perspective, that was kind of, did I miss an episode? Because it just kind of came out of nowhere, and there was no explanation to where she was before. Like, she just spontaneously erupted into the universe in that particular point in time. And it doesn't get addressed anywhere else either. Where was she living beforehand? And other people do say, oh, I was here and I was there, and she never says it. So as far as the script goes, that's another thing where I think maybe something got missed, or something got left out, or something got cut, or someone was changing their lines and they couldn't get them to stop, so they just kept stuff in. Who knows? It could be any of those things. But immediately after that, we see her sitting on a rooftop. Doesn't explain how she got into this other person's building, but there's an apartment building, and she's like, oh, I like the look of that. So she goes upstairs and she sits up on the top floor of this apartment building where they've got like a ledge, and she just let herself in, and she was somehow able to get up to, I don't know, it's in America, so maybe there's stuff in America. I've never lived in apartments, so maybe there's a thing where just ordinary people can walk in off the street and go straight up. I don't know. If you live in one and you know that the answer to that, I would love to know that too. But she's up there and she's just sitting on the ledge overlooking the city, because I guess it's trying to point out, I finally moved to the city that I wanted to live in. And this guy bursts onto the veranda, onto the deck up there, and all you see is he's angry and he kicks a chair, and it's either he's aggressive generally or he's upset, but it tends to come across more that something bad's just happened and he's just really upset. He was only taking his frustration out on a chair, but then he's able to turn it off instantly. He just notices her there, and that rage is gone, like it was an unintentional outburst. So that actually got me noticing things about him at that particular point, because the first time I watched it, I literally just watched it. Second time I watched all the way through while taking notes about specific things that really caught my eye, and her being not really in one headspace or really cohesive in what her character should have been doing. The behavior was kind of off, is something that I noticed about her. And his character, I saw her and I saw his character, and it was very hard to see her as anything other than Blake. And I tried really hard because I want to be able to separate the inside drama from the outside drama. But you could very easily see him as Ryle. He was not Justin, he was Ryle in this particular movie, which is what you want from an actor, obviously. But he sees her and he's like, oh, you're sitting up on the ledge, you shouldn't do that. There's a good reason for that. He's actually a neurosurgeon. So he's like, doctor says don't sit on the very high building ledge because if you fall, you'll die. So don't sit there, please. And she's like, I don't know why I'm so suddenly attracted to you. That was something that was very flirtatiously noticed, that you could see. She saw him be physically aggressive to a chair, and someone who would be triggered by that is like anyone who's seen or experienced physical that stuff before would be noticing that and go, oh, I don't know why, but I'm triggered. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. She was a little bit, oh, I like the look of that. And a little bit of the editing and the angles and stuff very much made it look like that attracted her, seeing him burst on and be like, oh, I'm handsome. So that didn't look to me, as someone who's experienced DV, didn't look realistic for what the core topic is. And my analysis is completely, as much as I can, about how accurately does the movie depict or address that situation. Because if it's the core point, it should be the core point. It should be central to the storyline, and all of the other elements should come back to it. That's like anything. If it's meant to be a horror movie, everything's supposed to lead back to the core thing that's making you scared. If it's a rom-com, everything's meant to come back to being romantic and a bit of a tearjerker maybe, and just affectionate and dreamy. And if it's meant to be about DV, even the editing styles, even the cinematic filming, everything to do with it, even just the music in the background and the moments when the music just tapers away or cuts off completely, these are things that are supposed to incite kind of like that almost artificial triggered feeling in the audience, so that we get the feeling of the experience that's happening. And without that, you kind of lose the point. So at this point, it's about maybe 20 minutes in, and you still have that, it's a rom-com kind of TV sitcom kind of feel about it. You don't have a deeper element in it. So it actually takes a very long time to start looking and feeling like a serious film. And I don't know whose edit I watched. I know that there's two. I know that he did one from a DV perspective, and he says he had a DV consultant to go through all of the elements in it that would depict that scenario. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it might have been a person who's experienced it and learnt like I did, or it could be a person who is a psychologist and learnt that way, because both people would have different perspectives. I'm always going to say that someone who has experienced and learnt is going to have more of an insight than someone who's just gone to school and done heaps of study of people who've experienced it but never actually had the first-hand experience in that situation. There's always going to be something that they don't get, something, because they never had the feeling. It's like an animal that's never been hunted is never going to be that afraid of people. They can see other things happen, but doesn't mean that they're going to be afraid. It's like you can take your dog hunting, and the dog's going to see you doing these horrible things to animals, but they're not going to be afraid of you in the way that the animal that you're hunting would be. So it's necessary to have personal experience in one of these situations to have the best possible insight, which unfortunately I have a great deal of experience personally in a lot of these things, which is hence the talking. So after that, it's very obvious that they kind of click, but he's like, oh, pretty lady, and she's like, oh, handsome man, and they get talking, and he can't convince her to climb down, so he climbs up, and I think this is the rooftop scene where everyone's saying that she changed the script, and he was like, okay, she's doing something different I wasn't prepared for, I'll just go with it. So I don't know if this is his version or her version, but I think it's her version. And the script very much seems a bit off. Like it's, if I had to say my intentions for it, I think recast her, do it again, rewrite the script a little bit differently, and maybe make it an extra 20 minutes longer and get to a few points faster. Because there are things in the book, apparently, I haven't read it, as I said, but other people who have read the book have said there are things in it which are meant to hit a certain way and weren't in the movie. So I'll find out what those ones were. So I heard two stories. One that she's claiming that he did it, and one that's claiming other people are saying that she did it, and that she did it on the spot on the day, but is telling people that he wrote it. So whatever we find out happens, but either way, it's that she, on the day that they were supposed to be filming that scene, changed the lines, and he just had to roll with it. He couldn't get her to say the lines that he had written. So either way, whether it was Blake or Ryan, it definitely wasn't the director. So after that, like, it doesn't explain what happens next other than somehow she's living in Boston in a different place and she gets the flower shop that she wanted. This is another point for me. During the promo stuff, it makes it sound like she is this woman who experienced DV, escaped, and restarts her life by opening a flower shop in that order. And the book, I'll find out more when I read the book. And if you want me to do a bit of a talk about the book, and if you guys want to talk to me about the book, let me know. Because when I get a hang of it, it's probably something that's going to take me a couple of days to sit through and read, because I can't really read that stuff all in one go. I have to digest it as I go. But she opens the flower shop that she's been dreaming of. Doesn't explain how she gets the money. She went from not necessarily living anywhere to suddenly living in Boston and opening a flower shop. So something going on there. It sounds like we missed something. I think maybe something's in the book about that explains some of these things, but we won't see them in the movie because obviously they had to make the movie length rather than book length. And Lord of the Rings knows that when you try and make the movie book length, it's 6 hours long. But she opens her flower shop, and this other video says that maybe it was an intentional thing, but the guy, his sister, just happens to stumble into the shop and starts working there. Her opinion of how it looked is not my opinion of how it looked. And listening to the actual script during this particular scene, it was kind of very different to what this other person's opinion in her video was. So she said, long story short, she said it was basically a funny coincidence that somehow the sister of the guy that she met on the rooftop just happens to stumble into her shop and ask for a job. Didn't happen. She was nearby, saw this shop opening up, had something else going on, and she was just curious. She didn't ask for a job. She was offered a job, and she had no idea who this woman was. And we find out later that the boy, the guy, had no idea that his sister was working with her either. There are several signs that show that he had no idea and no reason to know. But no names were really exchanged as well at the beginning. So even if the two girls, Lily and the sister, even if they had really done a gaslighty situation, oh, I'm just pretending to come in here and look around at flowers because my brother has a crush on you. If it was one of those situations, it wouldn't have looked so genuine that she was like, oh, you're making a flower shop here. Wasn't expecting that. I hate flowers. So it didn't look the way this other person was describing it as looking, and it didn't sound the way she was describing it either. But perspectives differ and opinions differ, and that's okay. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion. Yeah, she did. She did at the premiere. She said that he said it, but other people on set were saying that she changed the script on the day and didn't start saying that Ryan wrote it until later, almost like she was backtracking, which is why I'm saying that there are two stories for it, because there's what we saw her say on the red carpet, and there's what people who are working on the film say they noticed while working on the film. And because it's all just hearsay either way, we may never know for certain. We may know soon. I agree with that. I reckon she is too. I personally don't enjoy her. I've never really been much of a fan of her at all, but she's just not my kind of person, really. But you're allowed to like and dislike different actors and actresses for different reasons. I don't think that she had the personal insight to bring Lily to life the way that Lily needed to be brought to life. She saw one aspect of the character and she completely didn't even notice that she was not catching the second side of it, which is why she brought out the angles that she did. So the two together, they put the shop together. A little while later, her husband is nearby, and the sister's husband is nearby and comes over with Ryle to the shop, thinking we're just going to go see my wife, my sister, and that was it. And that's when Ryle goes, oh, you work here. This is your flower shop. You're the girl. And it's very... Justin Baldoni is actually a pretty good actor. And for this, I know he said that he put a lot of extra work into learning the art of being a DV perpetrator, to try and get his head into the space of a person who would be capable of committing those things so that he could portray it truthfully. And it caused him emotional distress and mental distress in the process of trying to get to that place for the character. On the other hand, Blake has actually said, and you can look this up even, she says about herself, she's not a very good actress, and that she is not very good and doesn't like to step into an actor, like a character's role. She doesn't engross herself. It almost sounded, at the time, it almost sounded like she was having a dig at him though, because he said, I engross myself in my character. And she said, I'm not one of those actors who engrosses myself in the character. When I act, it's literally just me being me. So at the time, that sounded odd. And that was before we found out other stuff. But the way he sees her when he first looks up at her when he's on the rooftop with her is shocked and stunned. Like, wow. Instantly infatuated. And the way he looks at her when he comes into the flower shop is the same way. Wow, it's you. Instantly infatuated. And the sister notices the flirting. The sister notices, and it's not even really flirting, it's very held back. He doesn't lean in and get all aggressive with his attraction to her. He's very He can't hide the fact that he's keen, but he is not overstepping boundaries either. And that's something that is consistent throughout the movie. He doesn't overstep boundaries until one point. And then after that, he doesn't overstep again. And even in that one point, if you see it from her perspective, then, and I say her perspective as Lily, not Blake, because I so wish that they recast her, because she, I heard this a long time ago that you can tell the quality of an actor or an actress by how well they can make you hate them in a movie while still loving them. And Harrison Ford, I think, is exactly that character. He's the person that you can see as Indiana Jones and be absolutely diehard for. And then you can see him as the worst person, the most triggering person in the world in What Lies Beneath, which is also a movie about this element, which really, really works. So much so that I sometimes can't watch it because it really hits home, is really accurate with certain things. And he does a really amazing job at making you believe he's that character, not Harrison Ford. You can forget who he is in the same way in this. You can forget that it's Justin Baldoni and you see Ryle. You have no idea about the extra stuff. And I'm going to say even Ryan Reynolds can do that, but he doesn't do that. He has like everything that he's in. He's always Ryan from slightly different angles, but it's always him. And I think that's where she goes with it as well. She's just her, and she needed to be Lily. But in this one particular scene, Lily would have been feeling like her boundaries were overstepped, and he doesn't push past that. She actually, several times, she oversteps on his boundaries. There are several occasions throughout the movie where Lily, as a character, whether it's Blake's basic perception of how the character is meant to come across, or if it's because that's how Lily is, but she oversteps on Ryle's boundaries on numerous occasions. She lays down plenty of her own, and he respects that. And it's very notable that he's respecting those boundaries, but she doesn't do the same, which really, if you're going to make it into a real DV situation, that wouldn't really happen. That is a very unrealistic situation, because if he had boundaries and she had boundaries, he would whittle down her boundaries until she didn't know where her boundaries were. She would set them and he would keep overstepping enough, and she would step back through lack of interest in confrontation. Been there, done that. I was the boiled frog once upon a time. And she would end up changing her boundary line over and over and over again until her back was against the wall. That's a lot of it. That's what's missing. That's one of the things that's missing in this particular movie from a genuine DV situation, because they make you think that everything's fine. You've heard the word love bombing. It's true, but it's in a narcissistic relationship that would happen. Not, which is more like Harry and Meghan. This is not that. And if you watch it to the end and then rewatch it, focus on him. Knowing what you know at the end of the movie, focus on him and all of the little things that happen, because I did exactly that. And I said at the beginning that there was something different that no one's mentioning. They're shaping it around her as a victim who up and escapes. It's actually meant to be, she is the child of an abusive household. She is traumatized from the life that she experienced as a kid, and her feelings were reinforced by the guy that she met when she was a teenager, her first love, which is Atlas. And they both have a very similar mother is being abused kind of childhood, so they bond over that. and they develop a connection that she obviously never shakes because it's always there. And you compare that to Ryle, he had a traumatic event happen as well. Something happened to him when he was very little, which she was like the second-hand victim to DV. He was a first-hand victim. And he spent his whole life basically beating himself up mentally and emotionally over this thing that happened when he was a kid. And it shaped the person he became. And I found that he himself was the real victim in a lot of situations. There were certain things that happened as a lash out. In some of my other videos, I've talked about toxic radiation. If I haven't, let me know, because I could have sworn I had. But toxic radiation is when a traumatized person, whether you mean to or not, has got to that point where you are defensive. You are defensive about the things that you've gone through. You are possibly still in the denial stage of the things you've gone through. And as soon as you get to that defend moment, like I used to be very, very flight or freeze. The events specific to my experience, a lot of it I was freeze. And then I morphed more into like a run kind of, don't let it happen, just run. And even my partner now, Josh, he will attest that I'm more likely to feel defensive and run just because it's still in me. Your brain signals get changed when you go through a series of trauma. And he tries to run on a couple of occasions, indicating that he is experiencing subconscious trauma events. But these are some of the times when she oversteps on him. So he experiences a conflict between them. A lot of it is based around her behavior, which is really unexcusable behavior. Spoiler, I think this is going to fall into the spoiler category. I don't know. In the trailers, it does indicate that this happens anyway. But they're in this new town, and something happens between Ryle and Lily at their home. He gets hurt. She steps in. She gets hurt, and they leave it at that. And then she's got a sore head, and he's got a sore hand, and it's the way it's framed, it's actually very easy to see why they made it this way. But they go to a restaurant, and her ex-boyfriend, her childhood love, Atlas, owns this restaurant. And she knows that because she's actually been to the restaurant once before to introduce Ryle to her mother. And she and Atlas just pretended that they didn't meet together, which is huge red flag. She should have seen him and gone back to the table and gone, oh, that's Atlas, by the way. But she didn't. She didn't mention anything. And she had actually spoken about him to Ryle before. And her mother even knew who Atlas was because he used to come over to their house when they were younger. There's a lot of flashbacks in this movie, which fill in the gaps along the way. So by the time you get to the end of the movie, you do know a lot more of the stuff that they just kind of didn't add in, but there are still scenes that feel like they're missing. So she gets back to the table, and she doesn't say that, by the way, that's my childhood love, suddenly moved over to Boston now, living around the corner from me. She hides it. She pretends nothing happened. And she goes, after she and Ryle get hurt the first time, they go to the restaurant, and Atlas, again, doesn't say anything. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't mention, oh, by the way, he's here at our table talking to us now. I'm just pretending I don't know him. And he sees that she's hurt, and he sees that Ryle is hurt, and he draws conclusions and he walks away. And she chases after him she makes excuses to get up and go, and she follows him and everything. And they encounter each other further down the hallway, and he's like, I can't believe you would let someone do that to you. Don't you remember what we experienced? Because both of them got to grow up seeing their mothers get hurt by men, which is really not fair for any person to experience, especially people that are not being offered support. Like, it's very clear that neither one of them has siblings, so they don't have a support network because their support network is the person getting hurt. So Atlas is like, why would you let him do this? I can't believe that. Like, we always said we would never let someone hurt each other like that. And she's like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not what you think. And they go back out to the table, but Ryle's there and he encounters them. And he's instantly like, why the hell you snuck off in a random corner with this guy that I don't know, but clearly you do? And they fight. Ryle finds out that's Atlas, and they fight. And this is actually all over YouTube. You can find it anyway, when Atlas and Ryle first encounter each other. But they leave, and she defends Ryle, and they leave. And outside, Ryle's obviously storming off. He's upset, he's hurt. He feels, basically, you'd feel cheated on. You'd feel something suspicious is going on here. And for someone who has trauma, you are more likely to feel defensive, and you are more likely to feel that a bit paranoid kind of about little things like that. And she's behaving very suspiciously. Plus, he's got the need to feel paranoid. So he's doing that. He's doing very normal behaviors for someone who is traumatized and feels triggered. So he tries to leave. She follows him, crossing boundaries because he's trying to get away. He doesn't want to engage in further conflict. He's trying to leave it. He had a lash out. He's trying to leave. And she is not letting him leave. And then she lies about it. He says, have you ever seen him here before? Have you ever been here before? She says no. But she did. The two of them and her mother went to that same restaurant earlier, and so she knew. And he knew that she was lying because he was at the restaurant with her. So he starts getting a little bit extra paranoid. He's now got justification to feel paranoid because she is being very suspicious. And if you take away the fact that she had a difficult childhood with what her parents went through, and take away what he experienced, which I'm not going to mention what he experienced because they don't say till the end, and I don't want to ruin that bit for anyone. And I haven't mentioned it in any of the external stuff either, so I really don't want to ruin that if that's something that you're intending to watch. But if you take away his built-in trauma and her childhood trauma and just take it as her behavior is super sketchy. In that particular situation, she is coming across, from my perspective, as someone who has lived through narcissistic abuse. She is behaving like a gaslighting narcissist. You saw what you didn't see. Kind of like, yes, I was there, but no, I wasn't. No, I wasn't there. You were with me. She's lying very badly. He notices it. She doesn't even acknowledge that anything bad happened. Did you watch the movie? Because I actually rewatched that bit to see if I missed maybe something, but she was gaslighting him, and he took note of the fact that she was lying, but he was so like infatuated with her. And people who have, I say this as well from experience, people who have experienced trauma from an early age are actually more likely to end up in an abusive relationship or a narcissistic relationship, because they feel for such a long time, especially during their childhood, so desperately unwanted and unloved that as soon as someone demonstrates affection towards them, they grab hold of that and they're like, okay, I'm loved by this person. I must love them as much as they love me, because you go through so much of a drought that you don't notice when you're drowning. So, and I've personally experienced that when you don't realize that you are getting in too deep with someone who doesn't actually really love you. It's just that they are very good at demonstrating if they do while lying to you. And that's what she's doing, especially at this point in the movie. And there are several points where she is caught lying, caught with an opportunity to say something and doesn't. And I think the intention was that she was supposed to be portraying a type of trauma as well, which would indicate, like, if she, let's replace Blake completely in this particular instance and say, throw in someone who can actually act. I think in all of these other occasions when Lily has had a gaslighting moment or an opportunity to be truthful but held back, I think the intention was that the actress portraying Lily is meant to do the same undertone that Ryle is doing. Justin is able to use all parts of his body and his face to emphasize that he is traumatized. And you can see it very clearly from the beginning, you just don't know why. But she never indicates that she's traumatized in any way, and she should be. And from hearing what Colleen Hoover has said about her own experiences and the reason why she wrote the book, I think Lily is actually meant to be played as a trauma victim who is then encountered with an event which jolts her system and gets her out of it, because she had her own type of trauma, experiencing that life from the child's perspective, seeing her father doing stuff to her mother. And as you go through the movie, you do find occasions where they use the flashbacks to point it out, but Lily as a character is very flat and jagged and doesn't demonstrate a trauma victim. And that's firsthand opinion from a trauma victim. So I'm not drinking coffee tonight. I'm actually drinking a ginger drink. It's non-alcoholic, obviously, because why would I be drinking? I don't drink, but it's a Bundaberg ginger beer, because it's one of my favorite drinks. Not my absolute favorite, but it's been so super hot today that I just needed something a little bit nice and not coffee to enjoy. But usually I drink coffee. I tried thinking of other ways of describing it, and I kind of couldn't. Like, there's really very little else that you can say about it, because it's very choppy. It's not even disassociated personality type of choppy. It's just, it's like, you know when they say that a genuine psychopath doesn't actually feel emotion well enough to portray it accurately? It's kind of like that. Because there are times when she's supposed to be a certain way and doesn't behave that way, and doesn't, like, she doesn't, as an actress, she doesn't come across with the undertones necessary for this role. And she might be fine for something else, but there needed to be more in this than she was able to provide. And I did say before that I think Anna Kendrick would have been a good choice, because in so many different things, she is actually able to portray what it looks like to be afraid and like freaked out completely, what it looks like to fight back, what it looks like to be a nice person, what it looks like to be an aggressive person, what it looks to be an emotional actress. And in the face, I think Anna Kendrick is one of those actresses who's going to look much younger than she is for a long time, because she just has a very like pixie kind of face. And side by side with Justin Baldoni, I don't think it would have worked quite as easily, but I don't know who I would have put in there instead. I think visually, I think maybe visually, Lily was meant to look a specific kind of way, and so they just thought, okay, Blake is there. I might actually try and find out why specifically Blake Lively got this role, because she may have stuck her foot in and gone, I just want this job, and got it. She may have not had to audition. She may have had Justin Baldoni actually hunt her out. I agree, she doesn't have enough emotional range, and she's never really experienced enough personally in her real life to draw those emotions out. She doesn't have a well to draw from. That's why. Thank you for that. So Colleen Hoover handpicked her, did she? Maybe because as the writer, that's the image that she saw in her head, and Blake has always kind of had a way of portraying herself to be a particular kind of person publicly, and that's all changed. But if that's why, but then, yeah, I've heard that too. I watch Popcorn Planet a lot, and that's something that they've actually spoken a lot about, that she basically did a bit of hunting around and chased down Colleen Hoover herself personally. So I don't know. Because I don't know if she did want to be a franchise, because she was very reluctant to discuss the concept of more movies. I saw I guess an interview. Blake was there, Colleen was there, a couple of the other people were there, and Blake was talking about the other books, and if you watch Colleen, she kind of shrunk back into her chair, and she nodded and said yes to whatever Blake was saying, but she didn't lean in. And someone who is genuinely keen will lean in and lean forwards. Someone who is not so sure or confident will lean back when they're being spoken over. And in that particular one, Blake was talking over her a lot, and saying how much she wanted the rest of the books. And that was one of those first ones where Blake was making it look and sound like the whole project was her idea from the get-go. And I remembered that because it's something that has popped up a couple of times, but it's also something that early on I heard two things, and I like to double check things. When I hear one thing and it sounds a bit off, I like to double check. So I heard that Justin was the director, and I'd had heard of him before because I used to watch Jane the Virgin, and I heard that she was calling herself the director, and it didn't sound right because his talking about it was more about the book, and her talking about it was a lot more about her stuff. Yeah, I think that's true as well, that it might have been like shrinking back from guilt, but I think Blake has a lot of clout to throw around, but she does it through other people's names, because she's really never been that much of a successful actress, but she likes to put other people down. I think she had potential. I hear that her family is full of like acting coaches and stuff like that. So people who are higher up, but on the deeper inside parts of the industry, and not really star quality, because they teach the stars how to do stuff. So I think she had an idea of herself which she hasn't been really able to show off. So some of the extra things that I caught really, which got me in the movie itself, was that there are three primary events that happen between Lily and Ryle. One and then two really close together. And the first one is shown to us as he slipped, she leant in, She got hurt, he got hurt. It was just a mutual fumble. And they both excused it off kind of that way. And the next one was he actually finds out that she's hiding stuff from him. She's got all of the opportunities in the world to say something, but after being kicked out of the restaurant, Atlas goes to her flower shop and kind of has a talk to her about it. And she's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Nothing happened. And every time we see her around Atlas, we see this very intense, I'm desperately in love with you, I never got over you kind of vibe from her, which is her behavior tends to fall into the emotional abuse kind of situation. She gaslights and pretends that nothing's happening, even when other people can see stuff is happening. And she's emotionally cheating at this point, because every time she sees him, she can't help but have flashbacks about them being together. And she's got this on her collarbone, she's got like this a heart tattoo, which we find out very easily is meant to be a representation of him. And she's got heaps of opportunities to tell Ryle the truth about it. She doesn't. Atlas puts his phone number in the back of her phone behind her case so that if an emergency happens, she can contact him. And she's always got his phone number there. And completely by accident, and I definitely think it was by accident, because at no point does Ryle show any indication of being a snoop at all. He finds the phone number in her case because he's going to plug in her phone like a good husband, and they have a little bit of an argument over it. He's like, I said please anyone but him, but you're obviously doing something with him, because why would you be hiding stuff from me? I'm always honest, you're always hiding stuff. And he tries to leave. This is him noticing himself get worked up over something which is genuinely warranted, and he tries to leave. He smashes her phone in the process, but he doesn't throw it at her, he throws it across the room because he's angry. That's another lash out thing which happens with people who are traumatized. You feel defensive, you lash out. And the fact that he is lashing out at objects, not people, is a pretty big telling thing as to where he's at emotionally. And he tries to leave, she follows him. Sometimes when your spouse wanders off, you need to let them take a breather. Someone who walks away from conflict is not a weak person. Someone who walks away from conflict is usually the person who has noticed their emotional state changing and is trying to do something positive about that. Because staying and arguing doesn't help. Sometimes you need to cool off. Sometimes you need to center yourself and go, okay, I know this happened, this happened, this happened. Why am I feeling this way? And replay the situation in your head so that you can kind of get to the situation you need to be in before re-engaging in the conversation. Because when you're emotionally worked up, you are not in control of your head. So he tried to walk away. She followed him and catches up with him on the stairs. And what we see is that she's grabbing at him to pull him back. He grabs at her to get her off him, swings, and she goes down the stairs. That's event number 2. And we see it as an accident. And there's a very intentional reason as to why we saw both those instances as accidents. So she gets a head injury, just a mild one, considering she went down the stairs. She should have had more injuries, I think. But she wakes up and she's in the apartment. He scooped her up and he brought her in and he's taking care of her. And he's obviously very upset. You can see in him as a character, Ryle is very much in a trauma state. And he's not paying attention. He's not fully in control of his mind. He's very, very, that's what a trauma state looks like. She should be in a trauma state, but she doesn't really appear like that. We see her sitting up and patting the cut on her head, like just with a tissue, and she's calm as anything. She is not portraying a realistic character who has just gone down the stairs, even if it was no one's fault. She's not behaving as a traumatized person who grew up with trauma, who is being hurt now. She's not reliving things. She's having flashbacks occasionally, but it's not the way that a person who's been through trauma would have a flashback. Because in my personal case, when something happens which makes me remember or feel even the tiniest little bit of how it was when something happened to me, I feel it in the moment and I see the flashbacks as it's happening, almost like I'm watching a split screen. I get triggered by people who are standing behind me, especially if they're taller than me. And I quite often have to tell my son, Nick, you can't stand there, because it's like, I can't have you there. It just triggers me just having him stand there. And he's probably the last person in the world who could ever trigger me, unless he's standing right behind me, because Nicholas is like this tall now. He's a little over 6 foot tall. But if he's standing in just the right position, just the presence of someone in that particular space feels like I'm in an elevator that is like contracting. I can't even stand in an elevator with too many people. I can't stand if I'm at the shops. I can't have someone standing too close behind me. I have to turn and like prevent them from being directly behind me. And that's all a trauma response. And the first couple of times it would happen to me, I would either lash out. I still occasionally don't stand there and I get bothered by it, but I would get flashbacks of like shadows because of something else. I would see what happened to me and other people standing there, because I had one particular person who was abusing me, and he was taller than me, and he used to stand over me to intimidate me and fight me down to stop me from fighting back. So it's something that is a lingering trauma response that may never go away, because it's like muscle memory at this point. But while I'm in one of those situations, that's when I would have a flashback. So her flashbacks are kind of not really connected to what they should be. So we see her patting her head, and he is in one of these almost fugue kind of not really there states. I've described it before as when you're feeling the way he is, your adrenaline is so high and you are so emotionally and physically and mentally worked up that your entire system is overworked, and you get tunnel vision. You can't see anything but the thing happening right now. And I don't know if it was intentional or if it just kind of came out as he was doing it anyway, but he gets Justin Baldoni as an actor in these particular moments his eyes changed. And he did get that very I'm not here, unfocused kind of tunnel vision, traumatized response in these moments. And we see him, he says, this is one of those trigger warnings. This is one of those events that I've lived through. I didn't personally find it very realistic as someone who has personally lived this specific experience. But he says, maybe I haven't shown you, like, as he's confronting her about the cheating and the emotional cheating, like, have you done anything, or just want to do something? Have you intentionally been lying to me, or you just couldn't tell me? Because it looks like she's gaslighting him about her relationship with Atlas. He was nuzzling her beforehand, and he bites. We don't find this out till later as well. He bites her tattoo. We thought he was nuzzling her. He bites her. And he says, I guess I haven't shown you how much I love you. And that turns into what I think is intended to be an R scene. But it's a very PG R scene. He doesn't strip down, he doesn't strip her down, he holds on to her, he pins her down on the couch, and he snuggles with her like someone who just desperately needs a hug, which a lot of the time, someone who's gone through trauma, and I tell my partner this all the time, if I seem like I'm really, really worked up and I really am like extra stay away from me, the thing I need most in that time is a hug without words. And so seeing him from the lens of understanding that he's traumatized, and especially since he doesn't do anything that would indicate that he's trying to R-word her, he sits on top of her so she can't leave, and he snuggles in like someone who needs a hug, and that's what he gets. And she is very unconvincing as an actress as to how she deals with this scene. She's telling him it's okay, and I know that's also in the script, but who wrote this part of the script? It's very unrealistic in the situation. Is she trying to say it's okay and leaning into it because she's trying to stop him from reacting worse? Is she trying to placate him? Why does her attitude and tone sound more comforting rather than submissive? That's the thing. She doesn't ever sound submissive. And unfortunately, someone who is been there, done that, is someone who is the victim in a DV relationship, whether it's a narcissistic relationship or not. Mine was, this one doesn't look like it. She is not submissive. A victim of abuse is usually beaten down time over time over time until they are a marble compared to what they were. And massive point of my channel is to reshape myself into who I need to be, who I am, after all of those pieces of myself were shredded away. Because a person who, especially, this is most especially in a narcissistic relationship, the narcissist starts by luring you in, and they overload your system with the stuff that you were missing out on. And then they tell you, oh, don't worry, those people are disagreeing because like they think it's too soon because they're just not us. So we don't need to listen to them because they're not in the relationship with us. And you go, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty right. And you follow the person you're now in a relationship with, and they simultaneously push more people away while convincing you it's your choice. And by the time you notice anything is not okay, they say that it's in your head, they say that it's your fault, they say that there is a justified reason for this behavior. And what we see in this particular movie is that there actually is a justified reason for him to feel traumatized. There is a justified reason for him, for Ryle, to be jealous and feel gaslit. And if anyone's doing a narcissistic relationship in this, she's the one who's doing something to him. She is sneaking around behind his back. She is lying about stuff. And it was her idea to, he proposed to her, but it was her idea to have a really quick, no one needs to come to it wedding. And he's a neurosurgeon. He could have afforded anything. And proposing on the day that his sister is having a baby is a normal response for someone who feels deeply in love. But it's not normal for the person to say, okay, but just, can we do it really quick and get it out of the way? That's not normal, and that's what she did. That indicates that something extra is going on with her that we haven't seen yet and that didn't actually get addressed. I think that's another attempt to try and make her look traumatized, but she doesn't. So I think if they get another actress in at any point to redo any of this, then hopefully it's someone who knows what it looks like to be traumatized or has actually done their research, because she didn't appear to. What's next? I don't want to take too much longer because I want to try and make sure that I'm not getting too off topic, because the whole point of this is to address it from my perspective and also get it out of my system. The talking allows me to get this out of my system, because until it's out of my system, it's going to bounce in my head until it makes me go crazy. And so she gets herself up and she leaves. He never does anything more than basically sit on her. And she leaves and she goes straight to Atlas's house. If you've ever been in a DV relationship before, you know that getting away is never that easy. The person that is attacking you follows you or tries to prevent you from leaving. I had 3 police officers witness me running with my baby out of my house away from the person who was trying to hurt me. And that's the only reason why he didn't cause me to be one of the other statistics, because typically people who try and get out don't survive past the day they try to escape. And that almost happened to me. But it's not as simple as you decide you want to leave, so you leave and they don't follow you. He tried to ring her a couple of times and she wouldn't answer. He tried to text her a couple of times. She didn't respond. But they show the texts and it's, I'm sorry, I just want to know where you are. I want to see you. I want to make it up to you. I promise it'll never happen. I'm so sorry. And he doesn't harass her past that point. And he had every reason and every ability to. He doesn't. And that's another sign that he's respecting her boundaries. And she could have gone anywhere. She could have gone to the police, but she goes to the person that she was actually genuinely in love with, because she may have loved him, but she also loved Ryle. She loved Ryle, but she also loved Atlas. And we get lots of indications that she loved Atlas more because she never got over it. Her last experience with Atlas was yet another physically traumatizing events that almost stopped Atlas from existence. If I don't want to get any further than that with that one, but it's something that she could have done so many different things and he could have done so many different things, but she successfully left, which is very rare for a DV victim to actually escape, because you've got to get your head in the right place to acknowledge that you can, and you've got to see it from your own perspective. Where can I go? What can I do? What's going to happen? There won't be any negative consequences of me leaving, but there will be consequences of me staying. There are so many things, and the getting away is the hardest part of that situation. But she did it without an issue, and they didn't really go into detail as to how. And she's in the car and she's like, whew, gone. And that's not how that happens. I was naked in a towel, running across my lawn with no shoes. And it's something that there might have been something more about that in the book, and they didn't show that as well. And from a DV perspective, making that at least seem like he was trying to stop her from getting away would have been more of a realistic DV situation. And I think addressing his trauma through everything needed to be more highlighted. It kind of looked like they were trying really hard to go, he's just aggressive. He has a reason, but he's aggressive. And they didn't say what was going on until after this bit, because the sister, who is now Lily's best friend, is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I should have known that something was not right, because my whole life and this happened before all of that. So this is why he's traumatized. And I should have told you something before. And that is a little bit of a realistic situation, because a lot of the time, if a person is traumatized and not at the point of being able to talk about it, which is a massive milestone, if you can get to the point where you can talk about it, getting to that stage is something that not enough people get to, because not enough people have exposure to a place to talk, which is hence my place. Join me at my place and we'll talk. You tell me what you want to say and we will chat. And if you want me to like talk to you privately, like I kind of am with you, Elisa. I'm talking mostly talking to you privately here while talking to everyone else. We're having a private public conversation about the movie. But the sister, knowing that something was going on and just not saying anything to the girlfriend is a pretty normal thing that can happen, because the sister's like, I don't want there to be a thing, so I'm pretending that there's not because I just don't want to see it in my brother. That's a relatively normal thing. But she's like, don't go back, just don't. And Lily's like, yep, I won't. And it's that easy. It's never that easy. It's not really genuinely that easy. And to come out of it and be at that point and not be again traumatized, because she's able to logically sit there afterwards with the sister and talk about the stuff. Like it took me 15 years to talk the way I am now about what I went through. 15 years. For her, it was overnight. In the time frame that she had, I had forgotten lots of things because my brain was trying to protect me from what I was going through, and I had disassociated from different things, and I was not even ready to admit that certain things had happened, like the R thing. That happened to me several times, and it was years later when I was even able to admit that something bad had happened to me, because at the time I was disassociating from it. So how am I to say that I'm okay like 6 months, 9 months after this stuff happens? She can't do it. I can't do it. No one can be that okay. It's just unheard of. It's unrealistic from a genuine DV perspective. And so she finds that she goes to the hospital with Alice, and he gets her checked out because she's got a big bite mark on her and she has a big hurt on her head because she went down the stairs. And she finds out that she's pregnant, which is, I don't think that's a spoiler because she has a baby in the movie, and there's a lot of talk about the fact that she has a baby in the movie. But she has the baby, and Ryle comes and he sees the baby, and she's very okay. She can be in the same room with him. She's not upset or traumatized or shocked or scared or stunned or anything about the fact that the person who was doing these things is in the room with her. And he's very apologetic because he's not really a bad person. A lot of the people who do this stuff to people are genuinely bad people. The person who hurt me hurt other women after me. One of them I actually did help. One of them I used my experiences to help her get custody of their child, and like get out of the situation. So it is something that it is quite common for the person doing it to be a real horrible person to the core. And they think that the stuff they're doing is justified and fine. But there are so many different occasions when Ryle looks hurt, traumatized, triggered. She doesn't. Why doesn't she? If it's a movie where she's breaking the cycle of abuse because her mother was abused, she lived it, she now has a baby, she doesn't want her baby to live it, so she's making sure that she sets boundaries to prevent it from happening. She doesn't want her baby to grow up seeing her being hurt by her father. She doesn't want her baby to grow up to be a person who's hurt. So she's breaking the cycle, and that is meant to be part of the point. That's it. Ends with us, is she gets away from her domestic abuser and she puts in more of an effort than her mum did to make a good life for her daughter, for her baby, to stop the cycle from continuing. And that's been mentioned several times, but not by her. She depicts it as I was a bit abused, so I ran away and I made new life by opening a flower shop, buy my alcohol. It's like she's trying to rewrite the story without knowing the story. And I don't know if this is true, but apparently she's never read any of the books either. I'm not a story person. I'm a documentary person. I'm a big movie person. I'm a cinematic person. I am more likely to see the movie than I am to read the book. But like I said before, this is not a concept that I would normally go out of my way to read or look at anyway, because I try to distance myself from things if I know that it has elements that should trigger me. But this movie, it didn't really trigger me the way it should have. The thing that triggered me is finding myself emotionally in Ryle's shoes a little bit, because he's someone who throughout the movie is struggling with his emotional recovery, living with trauma. He's living with PTSD. And as someone living with PTSD, I completely feel like I'm in his shoes, but I should feel like I'm in hers too. So she liked the I can't read that because I'm not wearing my glasses very well. It's like she dipped her toe into a DV relationship. Yes, I think you're very right with that. I would call this a parody or a stereotypical thing. Like this movie in my opinion is an epic fail. If you want to watch a movie which explores the concept of DV genuinely, What Lies Beneath does that very well. And it's something that draws you in, and it doesn't tell you that that's what it's about, but there are constantly elements to do with that throughout several different characters, and it's a pretty central point. And they do it from a perspective which is genuine and realistic. This is a parody. This is someone who's never experienced DV ever in their life saying, I think this is what it looks like, and I think this is what they feel. I will decide of my own opinion what they feel like in these situations based on what I see from my perspective as a person who's never seen it. And given that she's not that great an actress, she also didn't do that very well. So if they do a number 2, because there are more books, I hope they have him and a different her. There are plenty of other people who look similar enough to her that they can just put someone in who's actually a good actress. So we'll see what happens with that. I think based on what's happening with the legal stuff now, it's probable that she's going to find Amber Heard in Europe and just go live her life off in exile, and we can start again. Because if you try and drag someone down and say that they are doing something but they're not doing something, then you need to get called out for it. And I think that's exactly what's happening to her right now. So we'll see what happens. How many times did you watch it? I think with all the times I rewatched it, I think I probably watched it about 4 different times, because certain scenes I would go back and then go back and then go back and then skip to somewhere else and then go back and cross-check a few things. But the first time I had to just stop and then stop again and just do it in little segments. But the second time I watched it, like in a funny overlap, because I wanted to make sure 3. Yeah, it kind of needs that many times, doesn't it? Because there are some bits that are just, they don't make sense unless you know other information. And then it's like, did I hear that right? So you double check something, because it's just so bizarre the way it was put together. And I definitely believe the stories that she was trying to tamper with his copy of the script and his copy of the final cut, because it's kind of how it ends up looking. It's like something's been cut and you can't tell what it is because you haven't seen the other version yet. But the thing that happened to Ryle is something that I'm Australian, so it doesn't happen in Australia, but I know that it's something that does happen in the United States, so it probably hits home with a lot more people in America than it does in Australia. And that's, while that's unfortunate, that also might be a good thing, because it's something that gives a deeper side to him, so that we can see that not all people who do DV are genuinely bad people, but usually they are. And I think that's the way that Colleen Hoover wrote it, because it was about her mum and her dad. And when you have a relationship with both your parents, you don't really want to see only bad. You want to see potential positives and give potential explanations. And for this specific case, I think it was very important that she put in a genuine trauma-based reason to explain why he is the way he is, and why this might have happened, and why some people are more likely to do stuff as opposed to other people. Because if you've been through something and you haven't processed it, something's going to happen. It's going to come out of you some way. There's a certain amount that your body and your brain can handle before you purge. And all of these lash out events are not directed at anyone intentionally. They all happen really quickly. And it's at the end, when she's discussing these things with Ryle, that we see the full scope of what happened. We see that when they both got hurt at the beginning, he burned his hand, she leant in, which could be stepping into his bubble, because something triggered him, and she stepped into his boundary, and she got smacked for it. And it wasn't intentional, it was a reflex. And through understanding his perspective more, you see that in his specific case, it was reflective of what was going on inside. It was tunnel vision taking over. And even if you are just a genuinely that way person, there's a lot of reaction and not much intention when you go into a narcissistic relationship. And the main part of why I say this other woman's video is incorrect is because straight away she says narcissistic relationships are like this, and this is accusing the whole thing of being a narcissistic relationship. It's not. Narcissistic relationships are not the only kind of domestic violence situations, and this is not one. This is an abuse through trauma. Everyone in this movie pretty much has some kind of trauma. Even the sister has a bit of trauma, because she saw one bad thing happen to her family and she had to grow up as the second-hand victim to it. But Ryle was the first-hand victim to it. So everyone in here is traumatized in different ways. And by pointing that out, it gives more depth to the character than just women get smacked, because that's not true. Someone who's never lived it or had the experience of DV just assumes that DV is when a guy smacks and bashes his girl around and she gets a black eye, and that's the stereotype that is so unrealistic. Amber Heard tried to use it against Johnny Depp. I'm so glad that she was proven wrong with that, because women who have never experienced it also jump into the, oh, I got smacked, and that's what they think it is. But there are so many extra things in it than that. There's different levels to it. Being the person in a traumatic relationship, someone who is living with either trauma or in a DV relationship, you know that the entire situation is more like an onion, which just has more and more layers. Each time you go through one, you find another one, and it's either a reason or an excuse or something along those lines that makes you feel, oh, I needed for that to be done to me, or I understand why they did this to me, because there's a reason. And there's very few occasions where the person is just a horrible person, where it happens this way. But in a narcissistic relationship, that's when you tend to get the genuinely horrific people, and mine was a narcissistic one. It was very calculated, it was very targeted, and he liked to use the words, especially at the end, that he wanted me to be stuck. And that's a pretty important difference between a narcissistic relationship and an abusive relationship. So as far as the movie goes, in some ways, Ryle had it completely right on what his type of trauma was. And she never once shows that she is traumatized, and she should. She's not even, I would care to say that she's not even at that denial stage, because she can sit there at the end very, very calm, like she doesn't have any emotions about it, and say, this happened, and by the way, this happened, and by the way, this happened, and then this happened, and what is your explanation of that? And it's like, you would not be capable of thinking of it this clearly if you had genuinely gone through those things and living with the trauma from those things. So I'm hoping that anyone who sees this and has lived through trauma is able to see it from the lens of, this is a very softened down version of what could potentially happen, with a few explanations behind it. And there's a few red flags, but the red flags are mostly from Lily's behavior. And it should be that Ryle is the one with the red flags, but there's kicking the chair is a red flag, but that's the first time we see him. He's on the screen for like 2 seconds and that happens. And it doesn't look like, whether it's intentional or by accident, it doesn't look like a red flag from someone who's lived stuff like that. And it looks more like, oh, what's going on with this guy? There's obviously something's going on. And before you watch the movie, you know roughly what it's about. You know that it's meant to be, he's an abusive partner and she's the victim and she gets away. And it doesn't work. It's a very nice creation. It's a very nice idea of what it's supposed to look like without actually being right. And I'm hoping that if they do the second one, a couple of adjustments can fix those issues and inconsistencies. But you know, when you see a TV show and it's like, yeah, this is probably not going to be a multi-season series, it's a bit like that. Like some movies, even if they're meant to be a franchise, don't keep going, and there's nothing wrong with that. They'll reboot it in 20 years. So and take the Fantastic Four, for example. Like they're about to do a new reboot, and it's like, all right, already, we don't need to see another one, because they all just kind of sucked a bit. So there's no reason to keep doing them. So they may redo one of these, or they may keep going and see if it goes anywhere. They did that with the Divergent franchise. It came out with about the same time as the Hunger Games and had very similar themes, and it wasn't as successful as the Hunger Games, but the Hunger Games like went off to do like 7 movies, and Divergent should have just gone, okay, admit defeat and leave, but they made like the rest of the series on that, and it didn't get any better, but at least it finished. So they may do that. It may not get any better, but at least it'll finish, and who knows, in 20 years they may do a reboot, or try again with something similar but different. It may spark something. So, well, with that, it's pretty late here now where I am. If you've gotten this far, I hope you give me a thumbs up. I hope you subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And if there's anything I haven't mentioned, feel free to mention it, because I really want to make sure that I represent my opinion of this well enough and clearly enough, because it's not an opinion that I'm hearing anyone talk about. I said at the beginning that I have a different perspective and a different opinion to the average, and everyone seems to want to talk about this from the court case perspective, or one video is a psychologist who wants to talk about it from the psychologist perspective, but no one's talking about it from the survivor's perspective. So that's where I come in. And I've been here long enough, and I've gone through all the necessary stages of recovery over the past 15 years to get to this stage where I can use my experiences and my insights to hopefully help someone else who may or may not be going through something similar, or someone who just wants to better understand the situation. Because the more we talk about it, the less taboo the concept is, the less likely we're going to get another movie where they say they're going to talk about it, but they don't. So everything should be okay to talk about. We shouldn't have to say DV. We should be able to say it, call it what it is, call a spade a spade. It's domestic abuse or violence. You should be able to say that. As someone who survived it, I should have extra reason and right to own and admit this thing happened. I should be able to say the R word, but I don't even know if I can now, even though I've been talking for like almost 2 hours now. But I don't understand why there aren't more survivor stories, because a lot of it is because we are not really allowed to talk. We publicly, the people who've never experienced don't want to hear it. And if they do want to hear it, they want to hear a really softened, non-triggering version, because they don't want what they hear to trigger someone who may have experienced it. But the people who've experienced it kind of need to hear it. The people who've experienced it need to hear stories from other people who've gone through it. But then you come across blockages like YouTube, and if you say certain things, they go, oh, we can't let you put your video out, or we have to put that down, or we just won't publicize your video, we won't let people see it because it's taboo. It's like, it's not like I'm running around naked on my screen or something. It's something that a rather significantly large number of people experience DV at some point in their lives, whether it's directly through like their own relationship, or because a friend or a relative has experienced it. I have 4 sisters. That means there's 5 of us. There's bound to be 2 of us who experience it. And I think I've experienced enough of it for all of us. So you can say, me too, you just can't heal from it. Yep. And you're allowed to say me too more than you're allowed to say I was abused. The wording is the thing that catches people too, because no one really wants to hear it. It's like when you say, hi, how's your day, to just a casual acquaintance, or when you go to the shops or something. The only expected and tolerated answer is, yeah, not too bad, or something along those lines. No one actually wants to know. So I will say, how are you? And I will say, I hope you are doing well. And I will say, I hope that none of this has triggered you, but I do hope this helps and provides insight, because what the hell is the point of having gone through all of this and survived all of what I've gone through if I'm not able to use that to provide help to someone who needs it? And I think there are so many people who do need it, because without being able to create it for myself, I couldn't find it anywhere. And I know people need it because I needed it. And since making my YouTube channel, I've met people through here, either because they are just watching me, or people who I know in life, or people who have their own channels even, who have said to me that this is something that was missing. And if we need it, who knows how many other people need it? Maybe that might be the next big wave that we suddenly have, that you're allowed to go out and say, I survived domestic violence and I'm not okay. You can go out and say, I've never experienced domestic violence, but it bothers me. You should be allowed to say all of these things. So hopefully we can one day. Well, it's if you're still around, I'm going to say good night. It was very good chatting with you, especially you, Eliza, because you were here with me, I think the whole video actually. I kept you up. Yes, I agree, and that's part of why I think it's especially important that the way they're handling the court case is getting handled. So it is accidentally bringing, like, just the whole situation that they're doing is not only highlighting the DV situation, but the false accusations that happen as well, because a lot of women make false accusations as a means of escaping a relationship. And that's just another thing that hurts real victims, because it makes it harder to believe us when they're all out crying wolf. People don't want to listen to us. And it's another thing that makes it hard to tell the stories that people need to hear, because we are being silenced because they've heard enough of DV and harassment and Me Too and all of it, because people are also lying about it and making up stories and making it seem like it's a lot less serious. And that's part of why Blake Lively is quite offensive when she tries to talk about this stuff, because you don't want someone who's going out of their way to belittle a situation to try to stand up for it. So, oh, you're in the US. I know a lot of people in the US. Well, I'm glad you were here with me. It's, what time is it here? It's 1:30 a.m. here at the moment as I'm talking to you on Saturday. And so I've been trying to find an accurate time to do these live streams so that it works for me and so that it works for you guys, because I start around 11. Tonight it was 11:30, so that people are just going to bed here and just waking up in America, because I've got people who are watching me from both sides. Well, I think I'll definitely be able to get some sleep now that I've got that out of my head a little bit. And I was really glad to have you here chatting with me the entire way. Well, I hope you had fun. I had fun. My tiger had fun, even though I didn't use him very much tonight. And I hope to see you again next time. So, good night, good morning, and goodbye.